All right, well, let's see if we can move on. I'm sorry about the way the last video abruptly stopped. Yeah, I do all this on my phone. I'm not, like I've said in other videos, I'm not a professional computer geek and videographer and all that stuff. I'm just trying to get some information out to people who are willing to hear it. So it was on my phone, and I ran out of storage space on my phone, and it abruptly quit. So that was because I forgot to delete the previous video that I made and uploaded. So I'll try not to forget to do that again. But we left off here talking about, we're still reading through this chapter of Greg Williams' book called The Covenants of the God, and it's the chapter on the Mark of the Beast called the charagma, which is the word there, mark, in English in the Bible is the Greek word charagma. The badge of servitude yesterday versus the card, the badge of servitude today. This is what we've been reading through and kind of discussing as we go along. So we left off when we got abruptly stopped. We kind of read through this, but we'll start over again. The same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented. So let's take a look at what this word tormented is. And we come down here to Strong's 929, basanismos from 928, torment 6 times, to torture. And this is where I think it starts to get good, because this is kind of relates scripturally. A testing by the touchstone, which is a black silicaceous stone used to test the purity of gold or silver by the color of the streak produced on it by rubbing it with either metal. Torment, torture. Now, these are pretty strict, you know, they're pretty strong words. To me, God wants is a refining fire, right? He's wanting to burn off the dross from us, these impurities, this sin, our inability to keep his law. In fact, he says in Jeremiah that the new covenant, which is what he's bringing when he comes back, which is really just the renewed covenant, is he's going to write his law on our heart, and meaning he's going to burn away all this stubborn, stiff-necked way of man on us, this civilian way that we are so attached to, and he's going to imprint his law on our hearts so that we don't have as hard a time keeping it. Now, some people foolishly think that this has already happened, and I always say, well, are you keeping all the laws of God? And they'll think they are, and then I just start rattling off and questioning them like the adversary, you know, to get them. Now, if they answer honestly, the absolute truth is no, they're not keeping the law of God, because, and here's the simple truth of it. If you're keeping the civil laws of your earthly gods, your earthly sovereign powers, your ruling authorities, the state, the federal state, wherever you live, whether you live in a monarchy or a democracy or whatever, it doesn't matter. That there's gods many on earth. And if you're keeping the laws of those civil law gods, well, the very nature of keeping those laws cause you to violate every one of the laws of God. Remember, even if you're just a strict 10 commandment kind of guy, which is absolutely foolishness, the 2 greatest commandments aren't even listed in the 10 commandments. They come from somewhere else in the Torah. Leviticus 19:18, I think, and Deuteronomy 6:5. Are the 2 greatest commandments, and they're not even part of the 10 commandments. Remember, in the 10 commandments, we stopped him from speaking. He was going to speak them all to us. We're the one that said, oh, yeah, I can't handle your voice. Stop. Moses, you go up there and you get these laws from him and write them down. You come down and tell us, because I can't handle hearing his voice. And somehow we separate out these 10 that he spoke as though there's something special. No, the first commandment is all the way back in Genesis, to dress and keep it, be fruitful and multiply. That's the first commandment, you know, back there. All the commandments go from Genesis 1:1 up through the end of Deuteronomy. Everything else is just a restatement. The New Testament is just Jesus restating, Yeshua, just restating all of the laws of the Torah, because he is the living word. He's the living Torah. He's the living embodiment of that law, showing you what happens when it is written on your heart. That hasn't happened yet. Now, we can strive to keep it, and there's nothing that says you can't keep it. In fact, John the Baptist's parents were called in the New Testament as being perfect, righteous in the law, blameless, spotless. They kept them all according to the intent that they were intended to be kept in, not according to the false doctrines. Probably why John the Baptist's father got killed, because he kind of wasn't going along with the political system and religious crap of the day. Okay, so this tormented is not like what we think of torment. It's not like you're going to be waterboarded. It's the refining fire that we're going to go through this tribulation period, as we're preparing to be, as we're striving to be the wise virgins, his chaste bride. We've got to get all that. We got to stop being a whore. We got to stop, we got to come back to being a chaste virgin bride. So the torment that we go through, this hardship, this refining fire, this being part of, being rubbed on the touchstone, kind of like iron sharpening iron sort of thing. You're going to have the dross burned away as we go through this tribulation. A lot of people think, did God keep the Israelites from going through all of the torment of the first Exodus out of Egypt? Were they going through all those plagues that were coming down? Granted, they were given protections, but they were still tormented. They had to go through all that. And do you think it was easy for them once they crossed over? Even, think about how terrified and even though you've got the presence of God where you can visibly see his power and might. But do you think that's just going to be able to alleviate you of your mental torment and anguish, knowing, especially once they saw Pharaoh's army bearing down on them? And now they're out in the wilderness. They're no longer in the city-state of Egypt with, all the at that time modern amenities. You don't think that 40 years wandering the wilderness wasn't this kind of torment where they're being tested, like the touchstone, rubbing the gold to find out how pure it is? He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone. Again, a refiner's fire. In the presence of the holy angels, and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever. That's a 677 footnote. Aeon. From the same as 104, ever, world, never, plus evermore, age. You heard it. We're in the age of man, eternal, unto the ages of the ages, unto the age, this age, unto the ages of the worlds, universe, period of time, age, a human lifetime. Do you think this forever and ever of this torment that's going on, is this forever and ever as far as like eternal time? Or is this until the sixth day, the age of man is over? And once the millennial reign begins, do you think this ever and ever ceases? And they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image. And whosoever receiveth the mark of his name, here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments. And not just the 10, all of them. From Genesis 1:1 to the end of Deuteronomy. of Yahuwah, and of the faith, allegiance, fidelity, trust of Yeshua. So let's see what this word back here that we skipped over, his name, 678. What's this footmark? Romanized, unaccented, kai ho kapnos, and the smoke, that's just quoting from the Greek, it looks like. Okay, here's the Patience of the Saints, 679, Romanized, unaccented. Okay, so it's just, he's just pulling out the actual Greek, so you can go read it in the Greek. So who was the first beast? Was it Babylon or Rome, or does it matter? For were they not all the same, as was Egypt also? Who is the second beast made in the image of the first? We must ask, who is the beast that causes the new image that was like the first beast, and what would this image or likeness look like? At the time of Jesus, aka Yeshua, Rome, as a faltering republic, was well into a process of decay. Sound familiar? Of, quote, of a population of about 2 million, each class contributed its share to the common decay. The free citizens were idle. Wow, boy, doesn't that really make your thumb hurt here, especially after this COVID debacle, because I'm hearing that there's a lot of people that just don't want to return to work. Dissipated, sunken. Their chief thoughts of the theater and the arena, oh my goodness. Sporting events, football, baseball, basketball, whatever, and the theater, television, the internet, YouTube. And they were mostly supported at the public cost. While even in the time of Augustus, more than 200,000 persons were thus maintained by the state. Social Security, unemployment, food stamps, bailouts, COVID bailouts, whatever. What of the old Roman stock remained was rapidly decaying, partly from corruption, but chiefly from the increasing cessation of marriage and the nameless abominations of what remained of family life. This is going to continue, but Gray's going to add his own thoughts here. Family values were a chief topic of political rhetoric before every election and during the writing of the new Constitution by Augustus. Today, the media fills the chief thoughts of the people, and those kept at the public cost have peaked. Again, everybody is fairly dependent upon the system, whether they're receiving a direct payment or they're an employee in commerce and dependent on that employment. What are you going to do when that employment goes away? I just saw that it may have happened a while ago, but I'm just seeing, because I don't get to see everything right away, but I just saw that Google alone laid off 12,000 people. What are those people going to do? Probably going to go on the dole, right? At least temporarily, for unemployment benefits. Because I imagine working for Google, they were making a lot of money, so they were spending a lot of money. They're probably living pretty good high on the hog. So now they're probably in debt and they're panicked because they don't know what to do. So they're going to go suck on the government directly for a while because they're entitled because of their Social Security and their taxpayer ID number. Okay, so the quote continues, all contributed to the general decay. The social relations exhibited, if possible, even deeper corruption. The sanctity of marriage had ceased. Female dissipation and the general dissoluteness led at last to an almost entire cessation of marriage. This sounds like, to me, I think there's a movement today called MGTOW, or men going their own way. They're not getting into serious relationships and marriage because women have just, it's just, one, they're scared to death that the woman's just going to take them for everything they got through the legal system of the courts, through alimony and child support and everything else. And most of these women out here today are, whores. What's their body count before they even get married now? How many people have they slept with? So why is a guy wanting to get hooked up with that when she's going to constantly be, and a lot of men are the same way. They're constantly looking around. Abortion. Now this is back in ancient Rome. How does this sound like today? Abortion, and when Rome was collapsing, abortion and the exposure and murder of the newly born children were common. This is in Rome back in the day of Augustus. And tolerated. Unnatural vices, which even the greatest philosophers practiced, if not advocated, attained proportions which defy description. As regards the Roman rule, matters had greatly changed for the worse, since the mild sway of Augustus, under which, in the language of Philo, no one throughout the empire dared to molest the Jews. Today, living together, divorce, abortion on demand, and promiscuous lifestyles of the rich and famous are proclaimed, admired, and envied. Quote goes on, the first procurator whom Tiberius appointed over Judea found in Caiaphas, the high priest, a sufficiently submissive instrument of Roman tyranny. The procurators were imperial financial officers. So Pontius Pilate is more, he's trying to impose the Roman Pax Romana, the Roman commercial system throughout the Roman Empire. The office was generally in the hands of the Roman knights, which chiefly consisted of financial men, bankers, chief publicans, etc. The order of knighthood had sunk to such a low state, and the extractions of such a rule, especially in Judea, can better be imagined than described. Let's see the 680 footnote. Where'd that quote come from? Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah. It's a Bible CD, chapter 11. So these three paragraphs are from that Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah. Today, it is financial men, Wall Street, bankers, chief publicans, your politicians and lawyers, Republican or Democrat, and the money powers that sway authority in civil government at home and abroad. Rome was not an anarchy, but a complex system of laws, regulations, and obligations. The burdens that fell upon the average laborer in order to support this burgeoning bureaucracy and apathetic welfare state were immense, and they depended upon a complex system of tax collectors and revenue officers. The Gabbai, tax, there we go, we got to change the page, sorry. Tax collector collected the regular dues, which consisted of property tax, income tax, and poll tax. And the Moques collected tax and duty upon imports and exports, on all that was bought and sold, bridge money, road money, harbor dues, town dues, etc. They had invented a tax that reached into the life of almost everyone. There were taxes on axles, wheels, pack animals, pedestrians, roads, highways, on admission to markets to sell, or a sales tax on much that was purchased, on carriers, bridges, ships, and quays, on crossing rivers, on dams, on licenses. In short, on such a variety of objects that even the research of modern scholars has not been able to identify all the names of all the taxes. 681, let's see where that quote's coming from. Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah. Again, the same book. Now this is chapter 3. Today, not even certified public accountants can figure out all the complexities of the present tax system, and few understand by what authority it is imposed. I'll tell you what authority is imposed by. Your consent, contract. And when they were come to Capernaum, they that received tribute came to Peter and said, Doth not your master pay tribute? Matthew 17:24. They not only had to collect these taxes, but they had to keep track of who had paid and who had not, as well as who was a taxpayer and who was accepted from that obligation. Did you know that? You know, the tax laws are for taxpayers, not for non-taxpayers. That's the United States Supreme Court said that. With all the traveling and trade that was done, there had to be ways of establishing who you were. Uh-oh. The name, the number of the name, the mark. And what your status was. Slaves even had different statuses, as well as the residents. Subjects of the Roman Empire might be required to supply statute labor for work on local roads or public projects besides the poll tax. How were all these records kept and recorded in an orderly way? Today it's all done electronically through, your tax. Do you file your taxes online now? I mean, I'm sure there's still some people filling out a 1040 form and mailing it in, but man, most people are doing it online now. See, you keep submitting in ways that make it so much easier for the beast to turn you into human resources, merchandise, which you already are. But remember, it's just voluntary at this point. It hasn't become completely mandatory. You think it's mandatory now, but it's not. It's only mandatory because you want to do this system. You don't know about other systems and other ways. You think the only business out there is commerce. No. That's just because that's the only paradigm, the little Pandora's box that you're locked up in, that's been opened and scattered through the whole world the way of the adversary. They had many ways to keep track of slave and free men, as well as who had paid what and how much, and who was still owing on the myriad of taxes, fees, tariffs, interest, and penalties. This is back in ancient Rome. Contracts were sometimes etched or engraved with a quill in wet clay, and then the marks or seals of the parties and witnesses were pressed into the clay as a signature. The tablets were allowed to dry and were stored in the temple. Remember, I said yesterday in the video, temples are not what you think they were. They were government buildings. You picked the temple that you wanted to pledge and put your taxes, some of your taxes into for your benefits at a later date. This ancient method of record keeping, although not exclusive, was widely accepted. Long-term loans of indebtedness and usury took advantage of this permanent form of record keeping and made men and their lands a surety by virtue of those etched covenants. Do you pay property taxes today? Even if you're a renter, you're paying the property tax because that's embedded in your rent by your landlord. Yeah. Yeah. You don't own anything in allodial anymore. It's only mere legal title, possession and use. Solemnized by the signing of the hand. Such covenants often resulted in a form of bondage. Now, I mentioned this the other day, I think, when we were talking about these laws of the scriptures that talk about the effects of sin. Remember, the sin, the direct penalty of the sin only applies to the sinner. Just like in civil law, you know, if somebody commits murder, they don't go after and charge that murderer's son or daughter or parents with the crime of murder, right? Just the one who committed the crime. But does that crime have a rippling effect that's going to have some consequences on the children of the murderer, as well as maybe other family members, maybe the parent? Absolutely. The Bible talks about this and saying, you know, to the third and fourth generation will the effects of these sins of the ancestor be felt. Okay. So this surety by virtue of those in etched covenants, solemnized by the signing of the hand, such covenants often resulted in a form of bondage. Yeah, and that affects the family going forward for several generations. The fifth generation, fourth and fifth, are the ones that God tries to wake up. Because now the punishment, you can't just continually perpetuate this bondage. You gotta wake up to it so that you have the opportunity to repent and return. This is what the Jubilee signifies as well, the law of the Jubilee. Do you see that being played out anywhere in civil law? God, no. The Romans, and remember the Jubilee is the biggie in the 50th year, but remember there's releases in the law of God in every seventh year. Do you see that happening? No, not in the civil law. They don't do that. Now, you see some remnants of it, like, you know, they used to do military enlistment contracts for 6 years. That kind of followed the biblical precept of the 6 year that you can sign your life away for 6 years. But in the 7th year, as a bondservant, you got to be set free. And of course, then you can choose to become a permanent bondservant. And then they take you to the doorpost and put an awl through your ear and put an earring in your ear and mark you as a bondservant. But then you're finally released for in the Jubilee. You got to go out in the Jubilee. Mm-hmm. The Romans having no forgiveness, and the Roman law is the Roman civil law is our modern civil law is just another iteration. I wonder if that has something to do with this image of the beast. Our civil law today comes directly from Rome, but the Roman civil law came out of Babylon. Having no forgiveness in the 7th year and no year of Jubilee. Oh, okay, here we go. Just what I was talking about. Often enslaved men through debt more quickly than men were able to buy their freedom. Remember in the scriptures too, like, there's this Roman centurion who said, oh man, I had to buy my freedom and it cost me a lot. Yeah, it cost me a lot too. I think when all I was said and done, I don't even have the number on the cost that it has cost me to actually do what I need to do to actually bear the fruit of walking in the kingdom. Just the legal documentation process was about $7,000. That's just for, a couple of months worth. And that doesn't include all my time, effort, and energy. I'm just talking about the actual costs of the process. Just the mailing fees alone were huge. I mean, I did it myself, you know, but I had to buy a bunch of legal books. There's a cost. You know, when you're mailing stuff, registered mail, you know, with all this, I mean, that, and you're mailing stuff for 3 months straight to offices all over, man, you rack up a bill really, really quick. Okay, well, and then I had to give fees to, like, you know, witnesses, you know, because you're taking people's time. Time is money. I'm not going to try to snake somebody for, you know, something I want from them. You know, these notary publics and that sort of thing, these official witnesses of the state, you know, I'm giving them an offering. Some of them declare a fee. But if they didn't, if it was too low, you know, they're coming to me and doing this and going through all this, and I'm dragging them here and there for all the other stuff. I'm gonna pay for their gas money and their time, and often enslaved men through debt more quickly than men were able to buy their freedom. Yeah, it doesn't take much. Be not thou one of them that strike hands, enter contracts, make covenants, or of them that are sureties for debts. Now, every U.S. citizen is a surety for the public debt of their state and the United States, two corporations that they are corporate members of. Be in the world, but not of the world. Be among the civilians, but not a corporate member. Why? Because that means in order to be a corporate member, you've had to strike hands and become a surety for debt. Remember what I said. When you start keeping the civil law, you are going to violate every law of the Creator. It's inevitable. Because these two systems are diametrically opposed to one another. Now, they have some similar laws, like don't murder, you know. So in some ways they look similar, but they are polar opposites. Articles of clothes and social demeanor also marked a man and his status. Well, we see that today. You know, you'll if you see a man walking around in some fancy Italian suit and custom-made shoes, you know where his status is. He is locked into that system, baby. That guy will never come out. A man might go about with olemos, or reed pen behind his ear as a badge of his employment. And similarly, a carpenter carried a small wooden rule behind his ear. The use of more official identifications made of copper, brass, silver, or gold with family seals was a common practice. So we're talking about this charagma now, this mark. Slaves in the marketplace were given dried clay tablets to identify their owner. Their qualifications and origins. If such tablets were baked with the seal of the owner, they took on a permanency that protected the slave from unwarranted detention as he traveled through the public streets on errands for his master. You know what this sounds like to me? Is your identifying mark, like your driver's license, your passport. Remember, your master today isn't another human. It's a corporation called the state or a federation state. Like, you know, here in America, it's the state, like the state of California, but also the United States. In Europe, you've got the state of Germany, but also the European Union, the federation state. And even Germany itself is a federation state, because there were, I think, 15 German states, Bavaria, etc. Same thing with the UK. I mean, well, of course, UK did the Brexit thing, but the UK is still a federation state because it's England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, right? So your owner now is the state, and there's a good quote. I think that's probably in the Parents Padre video way back at the beginning of this playlist. You know, that Texas Attorney General, a bunch of parents with their 14th Amendment citizenship, state marriage licenses, birth certificates, Social Security. They asked the Texas Attorney General at the time, this is back in the 80s, does the state own our children? And of course, the Texas Attorney General, this is the reason you have this is because they recorded it, and they recorded it with the county recorder as evidence, because they were shocked. And the state attorney general was honest with them and said, which shocked the hell out of me, that it was completely honest. He says, yeah, the state of Texas own your children, but not only your children, but you too. And your parents and your grandparents, everybody that's gone under this system through contracts. So as you go around through the public, you know, you're constantly pulling out your ID. You want to go in and buy some liquor. You're going to prove that you're, you know, old enough, and the state's giving you, you know, you got an ID to prove that you're that. So that they don't tell you, oh, you get out of here, I'm not selling to you. That etched document was referred to as the charagma, the mark, the badge, which was the badge of servitude. As oaths of loyalty. Have you ever taken an oath of allegiance? To the government of Rome and its rulers became commonly required during the rise of Christianity. Now, everybody does this. If you're a civilian, if you're a subject U.S. citizen, you have pledged your allegiance to the United States and to the state that you reside in. You're under an oath of allegiance, an oath of faith. Faith is fidelity and allegiance. So where's your faith? Wherever you've pledged allegiance, that shows the fruit of your allegiance, your faith. The evidence of such a pledge of allegiance was often upon paper in front of witnesses and signed under penalty of perjury. You know, when you fill out your tax form, do you sign it under penalty of perjury, declaring yourself to be a U.S. citizen, a U.S. person? Sure. Yeah, you do. A study of these paper trails showing proof of allegiance and subjection to authority is a parallel to our modern times. Yep. I think that's where we'll leave off right now. I can see the time is starting to get about 40 minutes or so, and I don't want this to, and that's a good place. We'll kind of go back and read some of that again on the next one to get us before we go in. But understand, a study of these paper trails. What's your paper trails? Your birth certificate, your social security number, your marriage license, your driver's license, your business license, your hunting license, your fishing license, your occupational license, your professional license, the contracts for insurance, your bank, you know, your signature card at your bank, any oath of allegiance that you've taken, if you're, you know, when you've put your hand over your heart or taken your hat off and pledged allegiance. So, nothing's changed. The beast system has always been here. It's just that it's always been voluntary. What's coming is it's mandatory, and I hope to high heaven that many of you will be brave enough, and that there will be an asylum state for you to go to when you have to exodus out at the Feast of Tabernacles. Okay? And when you tabernacle. Remember, when they came out of Egypt the first time, where was the first place they camped? It was called Sukkot, i.e. tabernacles. Every year, when you go celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles and you go camp with a bunch of people somewhere out in the middle of nowhere, that's your rehearsal for where you're bugging out to, kids. But Christians don't keep any of that stuff. They have no clue that any of this is how this is going to unfold, because they think all of the laws of God have been nailed to the cross. It's very sad. Okay, we'll leave it off there. We'll come back. I put the marker here. God bless. Take care. We'll see you soon. Bye.